Hi, everyone. This is Siris Rivas-Verdejo, and I'm here for Choosing a Different Future. Thank you so much for checking in with us again. I have a wonderful guest, someone who has inspired me greatly, and I'm so glad that she decided to join us and for a discussion, a bit of a chat on choice and futures and possibilities and where else we end up going. I'd like to introduce you to Lisa Murray, who is the Australian founder of Creative Alchemy, a thriving international business which invites you to nurture your ideas into life with ease and get off the merry-go-round of should. How many of us have a lot of shoulds rolling around in our heads? She has an MBA, she's an MBA qualified business, and she's a creativity coach. Lisa's vision is to make living into a playful, satisfying adventure rather than a predictable daily grind. I'll have some more of that. She is an author of Stop Waiting, Start Creating, which I've read and I love, and everyone should read it. And she's written Living Beyond Burnout. She inspires entrepreneurs, change leaders, and creatives to embrace the blossoming of their vision and creating greater futures. So absolutely in line with everything that we've been talking about so far. And I know that knowing her, that she'll give us some other yummy tidbits. So hi, Lisa.
Hello, how are you today, Siris? I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure because, this is what, like creating different futures is one of my favorite topics, right?
Yes, yes. And I actually don't know nearly as much as I would like about the class that you have called Create Futures. So if you could speak to that, like what is that about?
Oh, yeah. Well, it kind of, it's really funny. It evolved through a conversation with a friend. She's like, in Ireland, I was like, what do you think I should like make my Europe tour about this year? And she was like, Creative Futures. And the funny thing was, so I did this whole tour of Europe with live events on a Creative Futures. And we literally were playing with creating your future in all these really fun ways with energy and awareness and just very different sort of set of tools that I've been using for myself over many years. And what was really interesting was at the end of that tour, I went to the Netherlands and I was recording my Living Beyond Burnout book as an audio. And I got to the very last chapter and it was called Creative Futures. And I was just like, what? And it was this totally fascinating moment of literally like 2-3 years ago, I was in the future naming that chapter. So Creative Futures really is about allowing people to live their greatest future rather than living any old future that comes along. Because, we can all do that.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. So gosh, there's so many questions that are coming to mind with that. I love the energy of that creation and the fact that you are already perceiving it even before it showed up. What are some ways that you've seen for yourself or for some of your clients, people who've taken your classes, where the future, that awareness of it can show up even before it's actually physically appeared?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Until I did this one thing, I never really saw it that way. But one thing I do know is for myself, and I've known other people do this as well. Like I will be obsessed that, I want a navy jacket or there's some particular item of clothing or thing that I would like. And I will like scour the shops and there will be nothing. And I'll be so frustrated. And then 2-3 years later, there they are everywhere. And by that time, of course, I've moved on. I'm not so interested in a navy jacket because everyone's got one, right? And so I think there's a pattern there. And I've started to look at this and try and actually fathom how it really works in the sense that I feel like I'm often 2 or 3 years ahead of like more basic things and well sometimes lifetimes ahead of other things and so I'm really looking at this thing of okay, so what is it that I've got now or that I had 2-3 years ago that is ready for now, because you can also work it the other way, so I don't know that it's a very cognitive process, to be really honest with you, but I'm trying to make it more cognitive to see if I can actually make it work even better for me.
Yeah, and it seems like it would actually be very empowering for other people as well if you can kind of break down that journey and the tools that you use to have clarity on that. And then how all of us, any of us who are aware of the future in that way or in a different way, like in their own way, how
Yeah.
they can use that capacity and gift to their advantage. So how much fun have you had using this to your advantage?
Oh, like it actually is really fun. And every time it shows up, I just giggle to myself. I'm like, oh yep, where are the future again? You know, and 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 it's really funny because I think sometimes we're also aware of the not so fun futures.
Mm.
And sometimes we use that against ourselves. And so part of what I was doing with Creative Futures also with people was starting to give them awareness of what that feels like so that they're aware of it beforehand and they can actually make a different choice. You know, because we do choose out of the shoulds, as you said in my bio. And like what I know, I did this just recently. I literally chose something from a should. And at the time I just knew. And now that person's like, I want you to work for free. And I'm like, I don't think so, you know? And so it's really one of these interesting things where we actually have all of the information and awareness that we need available to us. And it really is our willingness to choose a small no sometimes up front that makes us not have to choose the bigger no later, where you've got to be much more sort of, you know, firm with the person, let's just say. So I just find it really interesting how our awareness of the future literally feeds into every single choice that we have if we allow it to. And not always do we allow it to, you know. So, and it's a work in progress for each of us.
So when you're saying about choosing based on shoulds, is it always then contractive? Is it always then creating less possibilities when you choose based on shoulds versus something else?
I wouldn't say 100% of the time, because occasionally you might get lucky and it just might happen that that would be the best thing for you.
Mhm.
But I would say a lot of the time it is contractive. It actually takes us down a path that maybe because we're a people pleaser, we're actually like what I find is a lot of people are living other people's lives because they're people pleasing.
Mhm.
And, you know, like I could see with this girl, she needed something in a hurry. And technically, could I do it? Yes. Was it fun to work with her? No. And that was the bit I was aware of that I was trying to ignore because I knew I could do the actual work. And actually, it didn't end up very well because, I mean, we're just on totally different timelines almost in terms of how we work, what we, you know, what we know about things. And so I was trying to bring some awareness to what she was doing, but she didn't want to know about it. And so sometimes it's like that, you know, and that's where the shoulds actually, you know, if we were to look at every should, I look at it as it's a form of protection almost. It's a form of the universe saying to us, you really sure about that now? And, you know, if we listen to that, then there's a real magic because we get to choose something greater.
Wow. Wow. One of the things that's coming up as you're saying that is like this awareness of, well, okay, so if we're creating all these things now and we're then choosing and creating based on shoulds, many of which are not ours, these points of views of other
Yeah.
people, we're like, we might be thinking, oh, I should do this because of family, because of work, because of what I've been told about this or that. Like you're saying, this people pleasing or living other people's lives. That phrase in particular, it's like, well, wow, if we're living other people's lives now and then we're choosing based on other people's points of views, then the future that we create, is it actually going to be our future?
Not really. And this is the thing. This is really what when my friend and I started talking about creative futures, this was the thing that it was so instantly clear to me was it's about creating the greatest future that's available to you rather than just having something that seems okay at the time, you know, and we've all done, oh yeah, that'll be all right. And then we look at it and we go, yeah, it was all right, but what could I have had instead? And
Mm-hmm.
I think not to go into the regret because that's just a distraction, but to go to the space of, am I willing to choose for the greatest possibilities next time? And then how would I need to be different to be able to do that? That's what really fascinates me with it.
That's fascinating to me as well. One of the things that I love about how what you're saying is that it sounds like it's actually very inclusive of other people. It's not that, oh, you're looking at creating the greatest possible future for you, and it's excluding the people you have now, or that there's any kind of loss energy to it. It's actually sounds very expansive.
Yeah, it is. And you know, it's funny because I see leadership as the alchemy of inclusion. I
Ooh, I
literally
love
see,
that. Ooh,
oh, I
leadership is
know.
the alchemy of inclusion. Put that on a
Yes.
wall on t-shirts, Lisa. Oh my gosh, that gives me goosebumps. Woo!
Well, it's funny that you mentioned t-shirts. See, this is how, okay, this is how this works. Because I literally the last few days going, okay, it's time to make t-shirts. What am I going to put on them? And you just like, you know, said to me the thing. So, and this is,
There you go.
yeah, absolutely, right? So this is literally how it works in action. Because I could perceive by talking to you that we would create something really fun. And then you've given me the first little step of something else, you know. And this is the magic. And literally I see everything we're talking about as alchemy, as magic, because, you know, the alchemy used to be turning lead into gold, but I actually think it's much more about allowing our creative energies to, sorry, there's mozzies here. Wow, crazy. Allowing our creative energies to transform our future, because to me, that is gold.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm just letting all of that reverberate through my being. There is so much there. And I wonder too, so when you're talking about the choices that we're making right now, creating a different future, is there any like one or two tools that you would recommend for people to use to have more clarity on whatever awareness of future that they're getting now? Because there's so many different ways that
Yeah.
we both have talked about this before, in the sense that awareness can show up in so many different ways for different people. So how do you know that your awareness is actually your awareness and not that you're picking up on other people's points of views? All those
Yeah. Well, I think one of my favorite questions is this relevant to my future or other people's futures?
mm,
Because literally, if you start with that, and it's not the only question you want to ask, of course, because you don't, as we were just talking about, you don't want to exclude other people. But if it's, and maybe just start with, is this relevant to my future?
mm-hmm.
Okay. Because that there gives you a straight yes or no. So then you can go, okay, no, it's not. All right, I just need to keep moving and see what else is available. And it's funny because I actually called it creative futures because I do believe we have more than, I mean, we have multiple possible futures. And the more we get close to what is relevant to us, what is actually about our future, our greatest possibilities, then we actually create a greater future for the world. It's kind of got a knock-on effect, if that makes sense.
A knock-on effect. Can you talk about that a little bit more? I'm not familiar with
Yeah.
that phrase.
Oh, maybe it's an Aussie term. I
Maybe.
don't know.
I've been learning a
Yeah.
lot since so many of my friends are in Australia and New Zealand, so that's just
Yeah.
not one I've gotten to play
Yeah.
with yet.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, a knock-on effect is where one thing creates another. It's like a causal thing. You know,
Ah,
it's
we
like
call it
dominoes where
domino effect.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Very similar. Yeah. And so what I notice is that you can make a choice. Like, you know, years ago, I made a choice to have a partner who, let's just say, was a psychopathic narcissist. That's the probably the technical term for him, actually.
Mm.
And that had a huge knock-on effect in my life for many years. And in fact, I've had a sore arm the last few months. And literally, when I went to a bone therapist, I finally worked out I needed someone who worked on the fascia. And I went to this bone therapist and she said, did someone yank your arm? And I was like, oh yeah. And it was him. And it was so very interesting because it was like my body had held that trauma until it found the person who could unlock it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I see is we can have knock-on effects that aren't so pretty, or we can have ones that create our greatest future. And if I had been really willing to be present and aware at the time I met him, I would never have been with him, you know. And it doesn't make it a wrongness, but it makes it, wow, that's a good way to fuck up a life that's got a lot of potential and possibilities by choosing this one wrong thing. And I wasn't including me in that choice. I thought I was, but I actually wasn't. Okay.
Mm.
And so this is where it can work both ways, is I guess what I want to say. And now that I've gone, okay, really, that's not the direction I wish to go in. Definitely not. Now it's a space of, okay, cool. So is this relevant to me? Because just because someone likes me doesn't mean I have to like them.
Yeah.
You know? Because I
I've
realized
actually had that very awareness again. I've had it before this morning, so that's fresh. I hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like we're so good, because we're so aware energetically, we're so aware of people when they quite like us, you know, and that's great. But is it something for us, or is it for them? And what I realized is I was so aware I was always doing things for other people when it came to relationships, and literally now I'm like, I don't do that anymore, because I know that, you know, it has to be both of us or else it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That it's actually relevant and that it would create more for both of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've actually had that recently as well, where I had the awareness. I was always looking, I was engaged. This is the second engagement, and my ex-fiance called off the engagement. And I had realized that up until then, I had kept asking for me. So is it light for me? Is it actually going to work for me to get married? And it was always light. And I was willing to change everything and call it off myself if it was never light on my end. I didn't ask, what would it create for him if we got married? And part of that was because I didn't want to take on the responsibility of his choices, because I used to do that as people pleasing, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
I used to have everyone's to-do list in my to-do list. Maybe some of the people watching this later will relate to that in some way. And so I knew where everyone was supposed to be and what everyone was supposed to be doing and where they were and into the future now and into the future. And so I stopped doing that. I've been choosing something different. I've been using those energies for other things. It's been wonderful. And so I almost went to the other extreme, where I wasn't willing to then know what other people's choices would create for them as well. And that's one of the other pieces that I love that you're saying. You start with you and like, okay, what would this create for me? Is this relevant to me? And then, okay, what would this create for them? What would this create for the world? And go out from you outward. And now I know, okay, instead of going into regret, we're still friends and we still get along. I still hang out with his kids and everything. It's like, okay, so now I know to add that other question now. It's just another tool to the toolbox, add that other question so that I have a full picture, a more complete picture of what my choices and anyone else's that are connected with me, which is everyone really, are going to create for the future. I love also that what you're saying is there's the relationships you mentioned, there's some business aspects, but these tools and these considerations we can apply in every area of our lives. Like I can't think of one that it wouldn't apply to.
No, well, your future includes every area of your life, right?
You would hope, right? But how many times do people kind of like only focus on one area of their life as their future?
Oh, well, that's massive, actually. And you know, what I often see as well is people focusing on one area of their life as if that will make every other area okay. That will fix everything.
Exactly.
And it never works like that. They all work hand in hand.
I've totally done that. And every time I see that, I just feel my whole world and body collapse. And I'm like, wait, broaden out again. As soon as there's any kind of like narrowing of vision and of creation, it's like, why am I putting all my energy on only this one thing or this one thing here? I'm more than this one area of my life. Let's broaden it out again. Yeah. And let's expand some more. Gosh. So I'm hippity skippiting. I really would love to know, just for my own selfish reasons, I love your book, The Stop Waiting, Start Creating. Could you speak a little bit about that and kind of how it showed up? You've spoken a little bit about how in our previous conversations, and no one is really privy to that, so I'd love to speak to that too, about how there's a lot of nonlinear creating between that one and your burnout book.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, the burnout book was supposed to be the first book, but because it's been such a long time since I'd had burnout, I wasn't that interested in writing the burnout book. I was like, oh, doesn't really feel that fun. I don't want to write it, you know, all that stuff. And so I decided that I would write Stop Waiting, Start Creating, because that was really based on all the questions that people were asking me in my classes at the time. It was another, you know, Europe has something for me because there's another Europe tour, and I literally took all of the taster classes from that tour And that became the basis of Stop Waiting, Start Creating. And as well as a little bit of stuff that I'd previously written for the Burnout book. And it's funny because I thought that if I wrote Stop Waiting, Start Creating, I wouldn't have to write the Burnout book. I thought, oh, well, it's just about being creative and, blah, blah. And so I wrote it, and I had such a fun time writing it, and it ended up being a mega book. It's like 65,000 words or something, which is quite long for nonfiction, And I was literally like, okay, I'm done. And then the Burnout book would not go away. It was so determined to be in the world. And so then I had to actually look at, well, what does it want to create? What future is it seeking to create? Because it seemed like there must have been more to it than what I'd been looking at, because I had been looking only from my point of view, which was like, oh, I'm so bored and I'm so done, and put that thing over there somewhere. And of course, it wanted to create a greater future in the world. It wanted to create more for more people. And so when I went to write it, what I realized was I had an entire model for preventing and transforming burnout that really wasn't being talked about anywhere in the world. Now, I didn't know that was there, and it only really emerged as I was writing the book. So this is how our creations will create our future too, if we allow them to.
Well, one of the things that I'm getting that some of our listeners and viewers might not know about is how to communicate with their creations, how to actually receive the awareness from them, because you're talking about your books as if they're people.
Well, they aren't people, but they are entities. They are energies. They have very distinct energies, in fact. And I talk to all my creations like this. And literally, it's just questions. It's just asking them questions. And then sometimes they ask me questions, which that's when it gets really interesting. Because there's sometimes the questions I'm like, the things we don't want to see, or the things that we think we don't have to do, that will put us
write
out
the
of our
book and actually finish it, like you were saying.
Yeah. And then, because that book, literally, some of my friends were really onto me with that book. They were like, okay, Lisa, we're doing a little intervention here. When's the book going to be finished? And then they were like, they made me actually launch it to a live audience, which I've not done before. And I've done it online, but I never actually run a book launch event. And I didn't really want to do it, but I did it. And I'm actually really glad that I did, because I had so much fun. I actually made it into just such an adventure for everyone. And it was a very transformative adventure, actually, for some people, because I was giving out presents, and I just did it intuitively, energetically, and it was amazing how that worked. I'm still astonished by how that worked, actually. So our books, they're willing to listen to us, and they're also willing to give us awareness that we don't want to be aware of. And it's just being open to receiving it. Have the conversation in your head, in your heart, in your body. Sit something in front of you if you need to, if you feel a bit kooky doing it, whatever works for you. It really is just a matter of asking questions and listening for the answers, rather than thinking the answers.
Yeah. And I love that. And I was actually just about to ask you for examples, and then you gave such beautiful, simple ones that I think are very, very relevant and accessible for people. I know I've been raised by artists and writers my whole life, and I've been speaking to musicians, been growing up with musicians and artists and of all types since I can't even remember, like all of my family, really. And so they speak to their instruments, and they'll speak to their artwork, and they'll speak to their sculptures and their poetry. I'm not sure how many of them get or acknowledge that they're doing it. And that, because it's kind of like this, I'm just talking to myself. And it's a lot of times they'll say that, so I'm just talking to myself. It's like, are you really? Or are you actually talking to the entity that is the instruments, that is the creation as it stands now, and where it would like to go with all your different choices of color and of texture and of medium and things like that. And so I think that that's actually might be a little bit eye-opening for some of the folk. But I know it's like it didn't come from me. Lisa said it, even though I've been thinking this for forever. I know that. And I actually, funny enough, I found I've been finding some poetry that I wrote, because I started writing poetry when I was 10 years old, and I didn't realize until very recently how much I was already speaking to my writings back then. And then I sort of turned it off, or sort of being like, oh, I'm not really doing that, and saying that I was talking to me, and not really acknowledging these conversations that I was having with that and everything else, the earth, my body, And now rediscovering that over the last couple of years has been a total game changer. So how can some of these tools that you're talking about with creating our futures, how can we partner with our bodies to do
Well,
that?
it's funny.
I love talking about bodies.
You're so aware, because I was literally about to say, I really want to talk about embodiment.
Yay, good. Me too.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, and what I think the easy way to go into this conversation is, what I find is, if I can't do it just by, having it flow through my awareness, I literally will write it or paint it even. Often, and like behind me, you can see my latest adventures, which is alcoholings, which I'm just having so much fun doing.
Beautiful.
And it's really interesting because for me, I can express energy through color. And that then allows me to get awareness. And I can use a painting to actually have the inquiry of what's going on with something. And I just literally allow the different shapes and the feelings of them and the sensory aspects of that to actually communicate with me. And when you write, like, you could write to your book. Sometimes if I can't quite get through something, I'll write rather than just allow it to go through, just my awareness. And the writing, and especially if you do it with your non-dominant hand, the writing, it's literally like a conversation, like you would have if you were writing a script for a movie or a play. You're letting them have a talk, and then you have a talk, and them have a talk, and you have a talk. So I think this embodiment piece is really, really important. And it's becoming more and more and more a part of my work, because I find that when you literally physically bring that embodiment in, then the energies can move. Whereas when it's all just in your head, it's like it stops and starts in your head. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a challenging thing for a lot of creative people. They allow things to stop and start in their head, so nothing actually ever gets created. Yeah. Whereas when you start to embody, you be the energies of what this idea you've got can actually bring to the world. When you be those energies, that starts the process moving. So there's all kinds of different ways of embodying your creative energies, and it really just is a matter of experimenting, actually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when you're saying this, I'm thinking about all the different artists that I love. Some of the ones that I enjoy the most are the ones that really incorporate their body and involve their body. It's almost like the dance with painting and the dance with sculpture. Like they'll stretch and they'll move, and they really are co-creating with the materials. Like it's like, and the energy of it's almost like this wizardry that's happening as they're moving it along, instead of ones that are kind of just always having to sit and then they're really looking at all the details, and they don't kind of step back a little bit and then go back in. Like, it's not that it's not good to sit. I mean, do what works for you, but I definitely, for me, it's like I don't like sitting still that long with any of my creations. And so for me to be like, I have to gesture, I have to move out. Okay, we're going to go and get a little movement break and come back, and let's do this. And like, what is your body telling you this? Like, I even if they haven't acknowledged it, that their body's involved, that there's this physicality, this of actualization that's happening with their creation, that I'm like, that, yes. And then you can perceive that in the pieces, be it whatever medium it is. You can perceive that dynamism in those pieces. And so it's so funny, because I didn't realize when I was looking at certain pieces what was the process with some of the artists, and then I would start getting really into some artists, and I'd be like, let me look into their videos or into some of the biographies about them if they've passed away already. And they would mention this piece, and I was like, that's what I was picking up on. That's what I was perceiving. Wow. And knowing that that's not always the case. There's some exceptions, but there's definitely a strong preference for those artists and creators, even the leaders. Like, if you think of politics, that have the movement and they engage with the audience physically too. It's like, it's so much more interactive, and there's so much more of like this giving and receiving there, that I really enjoy with all of aspects of my life. And definitely when I'm enjoying and looking at like different pieces of art, or receiving from different pieces of art.
Well, one of the interesting things about what you're saying is that energy doesn't lie. And so when people are moving and when they're allowing different energies to move through their work, the energy is all there. And so what you're really talking about is the truth of the creative process, where people actually are going to the core of who they are, the, you know, the essence of what they're trying to express, rather than just sort of making something pretty for the sake of pretty, or, you know, there's a really big difference between someone expressing who they are and someone, you know, making something that's, you know, for sale. There's, you know, enormous sort of energetic difference in those two things in a lot of cases. Now, if you can bring those two things together,
That's what
you've
I
got
was
some
gonna ask.
alchemy.
Because that's the thing, is that so many of my friends that are artists and family that are artists, they have the separation between, okay, this artistry of being able to do whatever I want and following what's true for me, and having abundance and having money and having it actually, you know, generate wealth and opulence for them. And what if it wasn't separate?
Yeah. Well, you know, I actually think we are in the age of putting the starving artist sort of story to death. You know,
You don't really
I
hear
mean,
about it as much.
no, you don't. It's changing. And you know, part of that, of course, is because of technology. There's many ways that you can make money from your art now, whereas there used to be literally one, and that was to have someone who was wealthy collect your art. And so now there are many, many more possibilities, which I think is an amazing thing, and a real gift for the time we're in. And I mean, in terms of bringing those two things together, I think one of the really important things is a willingness to sell your art, because a lot of us get a little attached to what we've created, and you know, we have all sorts of ideas about how it should be sold, who should buy it, all sorts of stuff that's sitting below the surface. And when you start all of that and literally just go, you know, I'm willing to allow these art pieces to go wherever they need to go to create whatever change they can create, that is a totally different future, actually, that becomes possible through the art. Because basically what you're doing is you're sending your energy where it can be used for the greatest future, if you're willing to have total no point of view about what's possible with selling your art. It literally is getting all the shoulds and all the points of views out of the way.
Did you have that at all with any of your creations so far, where you kind of
Oh,
wanted to hold it onto it for a little bit longer, even though it was ready to go out into the world?
when I first started doing the visual medicine painting, which is not these ones, it's a different process, they were only very small paintings. And I did not, I put them on Facebook the first time I did them, and people were like, oh my gosh, can I buy them? And I was like, no, you know, and it literally was that energy. I did not want people to buy them because I didn't want to sell them. I loved them all. They were like my children, all these, you know, and I had hundreds of them. That was the funny thing. I literally had hundreds of them, still have hundreds of them. And I didn't want to sell them. And so that was really funny. But I think part of that too was that, going back to what I was saying about the capacity when you do an abstract work or an intuitive work to actually then allow it to interpret things in your life, allow it to give you, you know, guidance. And of course, I know that my paintings can work for anyone because I've experimented with this in some of my classes. I've said to people, okay. And then of course people want to keep the paintings. And I'm like, it's that same attachment thing, you know? So I think that one of the really big things for us as artists and creatives is to allow our creations to go into the world without attachment. And it's not an easy thing, because you do fall in love with them, and you know, and yet they need to be able to make their own way to the world exactly as they are.
Mm-hmm.
And exactly as they wish to create, because they actually have an awareness of the futures they can create that is beyond our cognitive cute little minds.
And it's interesting that you bring up, like, as if they were like your babies, because I can see how this would apply to parenting. You send the children out into the world when they're ready, when they're asking for it, without a point of view about whatever future they'd like to create, and you're sending your energy out through them, and also they have their own that they're choosing with their choices. Yeah, wow, that's phenomenal.
I want to tell you a story. There's a lady, a Swedish artist, a Swedish abstract artist. She actually was literally the first abstract artist in the world, but she was before Kandinsky and all of those guys. And yet her work was not released into the world until 20 years after her death. So she never saw a penny from her work. And it actually has not been sold, I think, even to this day. There have been some museum you know, like,
Are they
what do you
donated?
call it? They've donated some, and there've been some exhibitions. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. But she actually was painting to energy, and symbolically she would run seances with some of her friends, and they would paint to the energy, and the paintings are spectacularly beautiful. And I just think, you know, sometimes there is a place for that. You know, there are some people who they're so far into the future. Like, she was literally probably 100 years in the future, more than just the 20 years, you know, after her death. I feel like she was a long way in the future. And so sometimes you've got to know there is a timing for things. And she was aware of that. And kudos to her that she was willing just to have it be that way. But then there's other times when literally the art is for now and the future. And you can ask for which kind of art you would like to create. You know, for her, it wasn't about the money. It was about the future she was creating. And I'll send you her name. I actually can't remember it because it's a Swedish name and I'm not that great at those. But I'll send it to you so people can actually have a look.
Yeah, we'll pop that in the description for people.
Yeah.
I would
really
love
beautiful.
that.
Yeah. So I just wanted to sort of make a distinction there, because not everything is for now and not everything is for the future. And we need to be clear on which one is which.
I also would like to make the distinction too, that we've been talking about artists and creators and leaders, and some people don't think that they are that. And it's like, what with our actual choices, we're constantly creating the artistry of our lives. So even if you're not like a painter, a sculptor, a writer, any of the ones that we traditionally might think of as artists, you're absolutely, as soon as you're breathing in the world and you're choosing, and also when you're not choosing, you're creating something. And what kind of artwork would you like to create as your life? Would you like it to be something that's just for now? Would you like it to be something that's sustainable, that's for now and the future? All of that. There's just so many questions there. But I'm getting the sense that since we have been talking so much about art, that people might think, oh, well, this doesn't really apply to me. Maybe they're going to say, this isn't relevant to me. Like that question, is this relevant to me?
Yeah.
It's like, absolutely. If you're on this planet and you're choosing, you're an artist. And it's okay.
Yeah.
What would you like to create for
Yeah.
yourself, for your body, for the world?
Yeah. It's so true, you know. And it's funny because one of the things I talked about in Stop Waiting, Start Creating was literally, you know, this idea that creativity is literally creating something different. It's not actually about art. I mean, it's been kind of squashed into that box because that made it very easy for a lot of people to ignore their creative energies and to ignore their free will, I think, in many ways. It's like, no, you've got to fit in. You've got to belong. You've got to do it the right way. And I think and this is part of the starving artist paradigm, it came because they were trying to squash artists into a smaller and smaller box so that they would have less influence. Because art originally was about activism, about changing the world, about creating
They
a
were
different
rebels.
dynamic. Yeah, totally. You know, and I think that we need to live in a holistic way. We need to allow ourselves creative expression in whatever way that is for us. You know, one of my favorite things is going and hanging out, and I'm so lucky at the moment, I've got a house sit with some horses, and I love just going and sitting in the paddock with them because that is pure creative energy to me. You know, and so you've got to look at, well, what is creative energy for me? That's another really, really important question in this whole conversation, because it could be something totally different for you. You know, like this house I love this house actually, because the guy has a man shed downstairs and there's all sorts of tools and there's all sorts of different things. And he's like, you can play with any of it. Like, he totally got that I'm creative and that I would be curious about all of it. And he's got all these books like sorted by genre basically and by author. And he gave me like, the books are everywhere through the whole house. And he's given me the absolute most amazing tour of all of these different books. And so his creativity comes in these other ways, you know. And it was such a joy to just be present with him as he was showing me his creativity and his creative energies and the way he creates his future. And this is what I think is possible for all of us. It's about having that adventure, having that exploration of, what is this for me? How does this look in my life? And noticing where maybe you're a bit shut down, where you're trying to fit in with other people, where you're trying to do it right, where you're trying to belong.
No, it's funny you mentioned this, like what's your creative energies, what's inspiring to you, what kind of gets your juices flowing. And I just had a reminder today. I was at a really famous cemetery here, the Bonaventure Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia. And immediately I'm walking around and there's the moss and the big live oaks and all these tombstones with the mausoleums mixed in with the different tombstones. And there's not really much benches or seating area. There's not even that much grass. But immediately I was like, I'm coming back here and I'm going to write here and I'm going to create here. And this is going to be one of my new offices. Is it was so generative to me. And I could just hear all of the stories of all the people that had lived there and all the people that had visited there. And it wasn't this like turn off for me. I mean, I've always loved cemeteries, but I'd never thought of actually creating in one until now. And I'm going to grab a blanket in a little corner, snuggle up with a tombstone or something and see what shows up. And so the other thing too with that is, let's say you get an awareness now that something gets your juices flowing and gets you nice and creative. And then there's new things that can show up all the time, new places, new spaces, new people that inspire you to be like, okay, now this, and what else is possible? And now this, I'm going to check this out. So even if you may only have one or two now, I get the sense that some people, if you're open for all the unexpected new places and ways to create, there'll be more energies that'll inspire you and that'll light you up more and more as you go on, as you continue to choose and want to create.
It's so true. Because, you know, when I had burnout, I went to this sort of life direction psychic who was trying to sort me out because I really was just, you know, in a muddling mess, really. And she said to me, you know, your creative energies are so shut down, you don't even know what they are. I'm like, that's true. She goes, go and write a list of 25 things you like to do to be creative. I think I had like 2 things on that list because I just couldn't. It was like, what? Oh, and I realized how miserable basically my being was, because all of that expression and all of that enjoyment of different things, all of the adventure and, you know, experimental energy that I used to have when I was younger had become completely shut down by all the doing and the shoulds. And so I really made it a target. And I mean, those first few months, it was hard to find things. So, you know, if you're there and you're going, oh, it's all right for you, know that I probably started, you know, maybe even worse than where you are.
Yeah.
and really it was determination. I was determined that I would ignite this creative energy in my world again, because I knew, to me, creative energy is like the spirit of aliveness. It's literally our life force. It's what actually makes us, you know, feel like we're here on this planet. And that comes back to the embodiment part as well. Mm-hmm. It's the embodiment of our life force. So it's an important thing for every single person, is my view.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that, because I definitely was shut down when I was chronically sick and chronically in pain, and trying to crawl out of that and keep desiring something and knowing that more was possible, that I could have a life and a body that wasn't dealing with all the stuff that I was dealing with, and reaching out. Like, I love how you said you reached out to this other person. Sometimes that's what it takes. You can reach out to these different people and you can keep knowing that there's something lighter and more fun and joyful and creative out there. And you have it in you. It's just like kind of stoking the fires again until it goes, instead of having the fire burn you out, it's actually having it become a blaze again. Which, you know, actually makes me think of, you have something going on that's coming up too, that's called Glow Wild. Is there anything about that in Glow Wild? Because truth be told, I haven't gotten a chance to investigate it. Is there anything about the opposite of burnout with Glow Wild?
Well, yes, because Glow Wild is about, you know, it's it's about creative transformation, and it's about transforming anything you wish in your life. So it could be about burnout. It could be about the career that just does not thrill you anymore. It could be about, you know, anything you choose, really. And people have got all sorts of things on their wish lists, you know, of what they would like to change in this 6 months, because it goes for 6 months, because we are going to play with lots of different experiments and adventures. And it is about reigniting that creative energy. And, you know, it will work very well for people with burnout, as well as it will work very well for for people with, you know, who are really on a great path and really creating a great future, but they want it to be bigger and bolder and even more exciting, because we are playing with what's relevant to you. It's not a one size fits all game. It literally is, how can you glow? How can you absolutely bring the wildest parts of you to bear in the world, so that the creative futures that are available to you actually can come to fruition? So there's a lot of fun, a lot of creative transformation in there.
I love it. I love it. Well, we'll put all the details to that in our description and your contact information. Everyone, please feel free to message Lisa either directly through those contact information or posting some questions and comments below, and I'll let her know that your message, maybe she'll follow along and reply to them. I know she's really busy traveling all over and creating all over, but thank you so much, Lisa, given your busy schedule and everything you're creating and inspiring for people around the world, that you took the time to be on our show, choosing a different future. And if you guys liked hearing from Lisa and you would like other guests like her, let us know who you would recommend. And you could submit the people through choosingadifferentfuture.com. Or you could email me directly at choosingadifferentfuture@gmail.com. But yes, I'm so, so grateful for our guest, Lisa, and for all our guests so far in the season. We're wrapping up this season, and I'm so glad we were able to squeeze you in, Lisa, before the season ended, because this is the first one of many, is what I'm getting, is my awareness of the future. and it's been just such a treat to talk to you about all of the things we've talked about. And I would love it if you would jump back in anytime. You're always welcome to be a guest on the show in the future.
Oh, look, it's been a pleasure, Siris. Thank you so much for having me to play today.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.